Hamas gunmen launched an unprecedented assault on Israel from the Gaza Strip on the 7th of October, killing 1,200 people and taking about 240 hostages. The Israeli military responded with airstrikes on Gaza and launched a ground offensive. More than 21,000 people have been killed in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. During a temporary truce at the end of November, Hamas released 105 hostages and Israel freed 240 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. What is the goal of Israel's military operation in Gaza? Since the 7th of October attacks, Israel Defense Forces, IDF, warplanes have carried out airstrikes across Gaza while its troops have moved through the territory. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel had a clear goal of destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities, as well as freeing the hostages. Israel, the UK, US and other Western powers class Hamas as a terrorist organization. Mr. Netanyahu also declared that Israel would have overall security responsibility for Gaza for an indefinite period after the conflict. However, he later said Israel had no plans to reoccupy the territory. Israel drafted 300,000 reservists for the operation, boosting its standing force of 160,000. 1. Netanyahu says Israel paying heavy price for war. 2. What Gaza's death toll says about the war. What is happening on the ground in Gaza? The IDF says it has struck more than 22,000 targets since the 7th of October. It also says it has destroyed more than 800 tunnel shafts built underneath Gaza. Hamas previously claimed that its tunnel network stretches for 500 kilometers, 310 miles. Satellite images suggest that nearly 100,000 buildings in Gaza may have been damaged during the fighting. After the temporary truce ended, Israeli troops pushed into southern Gaza and began operations against Hamas and other armed groups in and around the city of Khan Yunis. The ground offensive is now expanding into refugee camps in central Gaza. The IDF has carried out many airstrikes on Rafah, near the Egyptian border, where it previously told residents of Khan Yunis to flee. There has been fierce fighting in the north, around the Jabalia refugee camp and the Shijaya district of Gaza City. The UN estimates that 100,000 civilians remain in the north. Israel claims to have killed thousands of Hamas fighters during the war and arrested hundreds. The IDF says 167 Israeli soldiers have been killed since the start of its ground offensive on the 27th of October. 1. False claims of staged deaths surge in Israel-Gaza war. 2. Gaza Strip in maps. How life has changed in 2 months. Who are the hostages and how many have been freed? During the 7th of October attacks, Hamas took about 240 hostages, who it said were hidden in safe places and tunnels within Gaza. Israel said more than 30 of the hostages were children, and at least 10 were aged over 60. It also said about half of the hostages had foreign passports from 25 different countries. Under a deal brokered by Qatar, a 7-day pause in fighting began on the 24th of November. During the truce, 81 Israelis and dual nationals were released, along with 24 foreigners. In return for the Israeli hostages, 240 Palestinians were free from Israeli jails. The released hostages included 1. 78 Israeli women and children. 2. 23 Thais and 1 Filipino. 3 Russian Israelis. Hamas let 4 Israeli hostages go before the truce, and another was freed by Israeli forces. Israeli troops mistakenly shot dead 3 hostages who were displaying a white flag in Gaza on the 15th of December. It is believed that more than 100 hostages remain alive in Gaza. A number of bodies have also been recovered and Israeli officials have confirmed the deaths of more than 20 people who had been held by Hamas. 1. The perils of hostage rescue. 2. Released Palestinians allege abuse in Israeli jails. Why did the pause in fighting end, and will another be agreed? Each side blamed the other for the collapse of the truce and resumption of fighting on the 1st of December. Mr. Netanyahu said Hamas had not met its obligation to release all of the women hostages, and had launched rockets at Israeli citizens. Hamas said Israel had refused to accept all offers to release other hostages. On the 13th of December, the UN General Assembly passed a non-binding resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, as well as the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. 5 days earlier, The US had vetoed a similar draft resolution at the UN Security Council, saying a ceasefire would allow Hamas to regroup. On the 22nd of December, the Security Council adopted a resolution calling for urgent steps to immediately allow safe, unhindered, and expanded humanitarian access and to create the conditions for a sustainable cessation of hostilities. But it stopped short of calling for a ceasefire in order to avoid a US veto. Hamas has said it and other armed groups in Gaza will not release any more hostages until Israel agrees to end the war. Mr. Netanyahu has promised to push on the war until the end. Whoever talks about stopping, there is no such thing, he told troops on the 25th of December. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 55,000 people have been injured since the start of the war. The World Health Organization, WHO, says only 13 out of Gaza's 36 hospitals are partially functioning. The 9 hospitals in the south are operating at 3 times their capacity, while facing critical shortages of basic supplies and fuel for generators. Mr. Netanyahu has admitted that Israel has been not successful in minimizing civilian casualties, but says Hamas has been using Gaza's civilians as human shields.